One of the greatest gifts of living alone is the absolute freedom to be who you truly are without performance, pretense, or compromise. When you live by yourself, you're no longer adjusting your behavior to please anyone. You don't have to edit your thoughts to avoid offending someone or shrink your personality to make others more comfortable. You don't have to play roles. You don't have to pretend to be stronger, quieter, gentler, or more agreeable than you really feel. You are allowed to take up all the space that belongs to you without guilt. There's a silent kind of liberation that comes from walking into your own home and knowing that everything, from the lighting to the energy, is yours to shape. You decorate in a way that reflects your taste. You play your music at your own volume. You eat what you want when you want. Your space becomes an external reflection of your internal self, not a shared middle ground that waters down who you are to avoid conflict or compromise. In solitude, you get to rediscover what truly resonates with your identity, what clothes you feel best in, what hobbies actually make you come alive, what values you stand for when no one is watching. Living alone strips away the layers you've unconsciously worn to survive relationships, layers formed by emotional negotiation, people-pleasing, or fear of abandonment. Instead, you're left with the raw truth of your being, and that's where authenticity begins. You become more aware of your habits, your boundaries, your needs. You stop hiding parts of yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. There's no pressure to be agreeable, no obligation to accommodate another person's emotional waves, no constant tension between who you are and who you're expected to be. You become the writer of your own narrative instead of a supporting character in someone else's story. In this space of self-governance, your opinions sharpen, your confidence strengthens, and your intuition becomes louder. You no longer dilute your voice to maintain harmony. You speak more clearly, act more decisively, and think more independently. There's no need to constantly read the emotional temperature of another person or seek validation to feel secure. You begin to build a relationship with yourself based on self-trust rather than relying on external feedback to determine your worth. Your quirks, flaws, and strengths are embraced fully, not negotiated, not hidden, not explained. And in that powerful solitude, something incredible happens. You begin to feel whole just as you are. One of the greatest gifts of living alone is the absolute freedom to be who you truly are without performance, pretense, or compromise. When you live by yourself, you're no longer adjusting your behavior to please anyone. You don't have to edit your thoughts to avoid offending someone or shrink your personality to make others more comfortable. You don't have to play roles. You don't have to pretend to be stronger, quieter, gentler, or more agreeable than you really feel. You are allowed to take up all the space that belongs to you without guilt. There's a silent kind of liberation that comes from walking into your own home and knowing that everything, from the lighting to the energy, is yours to shape. You decorate in a way that reflects your taste. You play your music at your own volume. You eat what you want when you want. Your space becomes an external reflection of your internal self, not a shared middle ground that waters down who you are to avoid conflict or compromise. In solitude, you get to rediscover what truly resonates with your identity, what clothes you feel best in, what hobbies actually make you come alive, what values you stand for when no one is watching. Living alone strips away the layers you've unconsciously worn to survive relationships, layers formed by emotional negotiation, people-pleasing, or fear of abandonment. Instead, you're left with the raw truth of your being. And that's where authenticity begins. You become more aware of your habits, your boundaries, your needs. You stop hiding parts of yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. There's no pressure to be agreeable, no obligation to accommodate another person's emotional waves, no constant tension between who you are and who you're expected to be. You become the writer of your own narrative. Instead of a supporting character in someone else's story, in this space of self-governance, your opinions sharpen, your confidence strengthens, and your intuition becomes louder. You no longer dilute your voice to maintain harmony. You speak more clearly, act more decisively, and think more independently. There's no need to constantly read the emotional temperature of another person or seek validation to feel secure. You begin to build a relationship with yourself based on self-trust rather than relying on external feedback to determine your worth. Your quirks, flaws, and strengths are embraced fully, not negotiated, not hidden, not explained. And in that powerful solitude, something incredible happens. You begin to feel whole just as you are. Living alone offers you complete dominion over your time, an underrated luxury in a world constantly pulling you in 1,000 directions. Time becomes yours in the most personal and sacred way. Every minute, every hour is a resource you allocate according to your energy, your goals, your rhythm. There's no need to check in, no requirement to accommodate someone else's schedule, no invisible pressure to align your day with another person's plans. The calendar becomes a canvas that only you paint on, free of interruptions or obligations you didn't choose. You wake when your body tells you to, not because someone else needs your attention. You eat when you're hungry, not when it's mealtime for two. You don't waste hours navigating compromise, what movie to watch, what restaurant to go to, what weekend plan makes sense for both parties. That time is preserved for your growth, your rest, your creativity. It becomes available for self-reflection, skill building, exploration, or even doing absolutely nothing without guilt or explanation. When you live alone, your schedule no longer revolves around emotional negotiations or subtle power plays. You don't wait for someone else to be ready. You don't cancel your priorities to meet someone halfway. You're not tethered to a timeline that drifts away from your purpose. Instead, your days unfold in a rhythm that is aligned with your natural energy peaks, your moments of inspiration, and your personal productivity style. You have the freedom to work late into the night if you're inspired, or to take slow, mindful mornings if your spirit needs calm. What's even more powerful is that you begin to develop a more intimate relationship with time itself. You start to notice how much of it you used to give away unconsciously in the name of togetherness. You recognize how often your personal goals were delayed because someone else's needs took priority. Living alone brings those patterns into sharp focus and allows you to reclaim your hours with clarity and intention. Your boundaries become clearer. You learn how long you actually need to rest, to read, to work, to recharge. You learn how much space your soul requires to feel whole. With no distractions, you dive deeper into projects you love, spend quality time in solitude without social guilt, and engage with your passions uninterrupted. You're no longer rushing to split time between your desires and someone else's expectations. You live in the full ownership of your schedule, with the freedom to move, pause, or pivot whenever your heart and mind call for it. One of the most profound benefits of living alone is the emotional stability that naturally arises when your inner world is no longer impacted by someone else's emotional turbulence. Relationships, even the healthiest ones, often come with unpredictable emotional weather, arguments, misunderstandings, passive aggressiveness, silent treatments, emotional demands. These fluctuations can subtly or overtly affect your peace, your focus, and your mental health. When you live alone, you remove yourself from this emotional back and forth and instead settle into a space of consistency, calm, and clarity. There is something deeply grounding about walking into your home and knowing that no one else's energy will be waiting for you. There's no tension in the air from unresolved conflicts, no emotional landmines that you must carefully avoid, no need to anticipate someone else's moods to protect your own balance. You don't have to decode anyone's silence or overanalyze a shift in tone. You don't have to walk on eggshells or overextend your emotional bandwidth to keep peace. In solitude, Emotional clarity becomes your default, not the exception. When you're living alone, your emotional space is sacred. You can process feelings at your own pace without the pressure to communicate them before you're ready. You're not expected to be emotionally available on demand. You cry when you need to cry, not when it's convenient for someone else. You take the time to journal, reflect, meditate, or simply sit in silence until your mind finds its own resolution. You're not forced to explain, justify, or defend your emotions to someone who may not understand them, or worse, dismiss them. This independence also removes emotional codependency. You're not relying on another person to regulate your feelings or to rescue you from your pain. You become your own safe place. You learn how to navigate through stress, anxiety, or sadness without projecting it onto someone else or internalizing someone else's emotional chaos as your own. You realize that many of your emotional highs and lows in past relationships were a result of shared instability, emotions bouncing between two people, unresolved issues compounding one another, and moods becoming contagious in unhealthy ways. Living alone shields you from that drain. Your emotional energy isn't constantly being consumed by attempts to soothe someone else, defend your needs, or survive emotional guilt trips. You're no longer trapped in cycles of over-apologizing, over-explaining, or over-compensating to maintain peace. Instead, you develop a more neutral, grounded emotional life, one where your thoughts and feelings are your own, not reactions to someone else's behavior. In this emotional stillness, something powerful begins to emerge: resilience. You become stronger, more self-aware, and more emotionally intelligent. You no longer fear solitude because it no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful, restorative, and full of possibility. Living alone puts you in full control of your finances, and that kind of autonomy is both empowering and transformative. In a relationship, financial decisions are often a negotiation, a blend of priorities, habits, values, and compromises. But when you live alone, your money is entirely your responsibility and entirely your choice. Every dollar earned, saved, or spent reflects your goals, your desires, and your understanding of value. You're no longer splitting bills with someone who might not share your spending habits or being held back by someone who doesn't have the same financial discipline or vision. You decide where your money goes, whether it's into long-term investments, personal development courses, travel experiences, your dream business, or simply the things that bring you joy. You don't have to justify your purchases, explain your budget, or feel guilty for buying something that serves your happiness. There's no tension about how money is being used, no hidden resentments from unequal contributions, no passive-aggressive remarks about spending habits. It's just you, your goals, and the financial strategy that makes the most sense for your life. Financial freedom while living alone also sharpens your awareness. You begin to track your expenses more consciously, understand your patterns, and develop discipline without pressure. You know exactly how much is coming in and how much is going out. You learn to plan not just for survival, but for success, setting clear savings goals, building emergency funds, and creating a lifestyle that's not just sustainable, but fulfilling. And because you're not supporting someone else's habits, vices, or unaligned dreams, you move forward faster, with less resistance and more momentum. Living alone eliminates the risk of financial entanglement, debts incurred by someone else, joint accounts drained by poor choices, or the burden of having to fund a lifestyle that doesn't reflect your values. You're free from the stress of co-dependency, where one person carries the weight while the other avoids responsibility. There's no anxiety over who pays what or whether the money you work hard for is being appreciated, misused, or wasted. This financial independence also fosters a deeper sense of pride and self-sufficiency. You know that every bill paid, every upgrade made, every item you own, it's all yours, earned through your own effort and decision-making. That kind of ownership builds confidence. It changes how you view your capabilities and your worth. You're not waiting for someone to rescue you, support you, or plan your future. You're doing it yourself, on your own terms, in your own time, and with your own vision. Living alone creates the perfect environment for deep self-awareness and genuine personal growth, something that often gets diluted or delayed in relationships. When you're by yourself, you're not constantly reacting to someone else's moods, needs, or expectations. You're not performing or adapting. You're just you, raw and unfiltered in the silence of your own presence. And in that silence, you start to hear yourself more clearly. You start to see the patterns in your behavior, recognize the root of your fears, and understand the truth of what drives you, not based on anyone else's opinion, but based on your lived, solitary experience. There is an unmatched clarity that comes from being alone with your thoughts for extended periods. You begin to notice how you respond to stress, how you soothe your pain, and what truly brings you peace. You realize which habits serve your growth and which ones are crutches you've carried from past relationships or social programming. There are no distractions, no emotional noise, no compromises pulling you away from this deep inner work. You are finally in a space where you can listen to your intuition, not just your impulses. Without the emotional entanglement of a relationship clouding your judgment or influencing your identity, you start to redefine what success, love, and happiness mean to you. You question your past beliefs. You reevaluate your goals. You begin to operate not from who you've been told to be, but from who you actually are. You become more intentional with your time, your energy, your words, and your vision. The absence of outside validation forces you to validate yourself, to trust yourself, to become your own inner compass rather than leaning on someone else for direction. Living alone also gives you the mental space and time to explore new interests and cultivate your passions without anyone else's approval or input. You're free to dive into books, hobbies, philosophies, and challenges that spark your curiosity. You can spend hours in self-study, learn new skills, journal deeply, reflect honestly, and evolve naturally without the pressure to entertain, explain, or compromise with someone else's comfort zone. It's in these moments of uninterrupted solitude that many people experience breakthroughs, not just in understanding who they are, but in creating who they want to become. And this process of growth isn't rushed. It unfolds at your own pace. You're not pressured to fix yourself for a partner or to match someone else's timeline for healing or progress. You get to go as deep as you need for as long as it takes in whatever direction feels right. This slow, deliberate self-exploration leads to more meaningful change because it comes from within, not from fear of rejection or desire for approval. It's authentic, lasting growth rooted in self, respect, and inner truth. When you live alone, your dreams belong to you, and only you. There is a sacred freedom in pursuing your vision without needing to explain it, negotiate it, or scale it down to make someone else comfortable. In many relationships, even the most well-intentioned ones, dreams often become diluted. One person's vision must coexist with another's reality, and in that mix, compromises start to take shape. You delay your plans to make space for theirs. You adjust your goals so they align with what feels reasonable to both of you. Sometimes you even let go of dreams altogether, sacrificing them quietly for the sake of harmony, obligation, or love. Living alone removes that weight. It allows you to move toward your goals with full force, without apology. You wake up each day without the friction of trying to mesh two life paths together. You're not worried about how your ambition will affect your partner's ego, time, or priorities. You no longer ask, will this upset someone else? But instead ask, is this right for me? And that one shift in mindset is monumental. It changes the trajectory of your life. It allows your dreams to expand without limits. When you are not bound to someone else's expectations or timelines, your creative potential explodes. You are free to take risks, make bold moves, and explore opportunities that others may not understand. You can switch careers, start a business, travel to places you've always dreamed of, or go back to school without having to consider how it will affect a partner's routine or plans. That independence becomes your launch pad, giving you the energy and mental space to commit fully to what drives you. Living alone also helps you stay aligned with your own values. You no longer bend to accommodate someone who doesn't believe in what you're building. You no longer downplay your goals to seem less intimidating or overextend yourself to support someone else's ambitions while yours collect dust in the background. You make your own rules, set your own deadlines, and determine your own pace. Every decision is your own, from the big life-altering ones to the small daily rituals that support your progress. There's also an emotional clarity that comes when you're not navigating someone else's doubts, fears, or insecurities about your vision. Relationships can bring silent resistance, comments that seem small but cut deep, a raised eyebrow, a dismissive tone, a lack of support when you need it most, and slowly you begin to second-guess yourself. But in solitude, those outside voices fall away. You replace them with your own affirmations. You become your own motivator, your own strategist, your own visionary. The path becomes clearer because the distractions disappear. What once felt like a tug of war between your heart and someone else's comfort zone now feels like a straight, open road ahead. Living alone teaches you one of the deepest and most transformative lessons in life: the ability to love without attachment, in the quiet of your own space, away from codependent dynamics and the emotional entanglement that often accompanies close relationships. You begin to understand that love is not about possession, control, or constant proximity. It is about presence, awareness, and freedom. You learn that love is something you can carry within you, express fully, and give freely, without the expectation of ownership or return. When you live alone, you start to untangle love from fear. In many relationships, love is often confused with attachment, a deep need for validation, a dependency on another person for emotional security, or a fear of being alone. But when solitude becomes your reality and you not only survive but thrive in it, you come face to face with your inner self. You learn that your worth doesn't depend on someone else calling you lovable. You realize that the anxiety of being abandoned or misunderstood fades when you no longer fear being alone. The emptiness you once associated with solitude gets replaced with peace, fulfillment, and clarity. This inner transformation allows you to love others without losing yourself. You become capable of appreciating someone without needing to cling to them. You admire beauty without feeling the urge to capture or contain it. Love becomes less about needing someone to fill a void and more about sharing what overflows from within you. You stop trying to mold yourself to fit someone else's desires because you've already accepted and honored your own. You stop chasing connection out of desperation because you've already built a deep connection with yourself. Living alone allows you to observe your emotional patterns with honesty. You see where you've confused control with care, where you've mistaken attention for love, and where you've attached your identity to another person's presence. These realizations don't come easily when you're constantly surrounded by others. They come in the stillness, in the silence, in the moments where you're forced to sit with your truth. And from that place, a more mature, peaceful version of love begins to take root, one that is no longer driven by fear of loss, but by the joy of simply giving and receiving without conditions. You also begin to discern the difference between needing someone and choosing someone. When you've built a life of independence and emotional resilience, you're no longer seeking a relationship to complete you. You're complete on your own. So any love you give comes from a place of abundance, not lack. You love because you want to, not because you need to. You care because it feels right, not because you're afraid of being left behind. That distinction changes everything. It redefines what intimacy means. It purifies your connections and removes the silent desperation that so often corrupts love.